All right, welcome to the flow. My name is Johnny. I'm one of the volunteers with Diviners Movement in Vietnam, and I'm very glad with today's special guest. She's been involved in one way or another with Diviners for the past few years, and I'm glad to have her on today for a longer form conversation, which we haven't had. So I met Wendy last year for Diviners Fest. She was one of the presenters and facilitators where she did Reiki practice and then she did a cacao ceremony with an intimate group. And it was absolutely life changing, I'm sure, for many of the students that came. And then what really made her special was that she's very present in the conversations and she was very forthcoming with her own experiences, which I really could enjoy. To top it all off, so she is in the Philippines. She's the founder and owner of Gassho Center of Healing Arts in Cebu. So if ever you are traveling to Southeast Asia and are going to Philippines, I completely recommend Cebu. And I'm hoping that Wendy can speak more about it because it's a spiritual place. She's a Reiki master healer. She's a cacao ceremony facilitator. She's an overall healing arts practitioner. She's getting a PhD in clinical psychology, as well as she has a fascination for Japan and for the samurai arts, which I am fascinated since I've been speaking one-on-one in my other setting of teaching English. So getting a feeling for Japanese culture as well. Welcome to the flow, Wendy.
Oh, thank you, Johnny. That's beautifully said. Well done. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Well, to stepping aside from the demographics, let everyone know who you are, why you are.
Oh, wow.
It's the impossible question. It's the
Diving
life
right in.
mystery. And it always is something to center us and ground us, to humble us.
Oh my gosh. Do you mean the big I am or the little I am?
Take it away.
No, once an energy healing session with a classmate from Reiki level 2, and he asked me, like, you know, to finish that statement, I am, and I was like, oh, I'm a teacher and I'm a this, I'm a mother, like this, like that. And he was like, no, but really, who are you behind the titles and the labels? And actually, during the soul alignment retreat that I conducted last November at the ashram, that was one of the questions that I asked the participants to reflect on. Is really like, who am I, aside from those labels and titles and so on. I don't know if I'm ready to dive into that.
That's all right. I completely understand it. But just let everyone know then, like, just a bit more about you.
Yeah, of
Since
course.
you do all of this and you're very world centric as well, which is fascinating for me since I often have a holistic mindset of traveling, of knowing people from different countries and their own cultural experience that makes them who they are.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't remember exactly what my response had been back then, but in a nutshell, I feel like I'm very centered in my purpose, what I'm here to contribute. Of course, it's every day it gets refined, right? But that really helps me define, who I am. Again, aside from the roles that I play, I am here fulfilling a specific purpose in this specific time, and each person that I encounter kind of like unlocks that. We have like there's a resonance, and it helps with that unfolding of my purpose and of the other person's purpose and the collective, as a ripple effect. So yeah, but aside from that, I can talk a little bit. Did you want to know a little bit about my um background, like where I'm from? And is that what?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Go back to where you're from and
Wow.
kind of Yeah, set it in a way that is most authentic to you and
Yeah.
kind of reflects who you are now in this stage of your
Mm.
life. Um, yeah.
So I was born in the Philippines, but I left when I was 6, and I grew up in Europe, and then I moved to the US. So I mostly lived in Asia, Europe, and the US, which makes me, I mean, there's pros and cons to that sort of lifestyle, right? Like, it's hard to create roots. So I've always been kind of a bit of a gypsy and a nomad. On the other hand, it's created it makes it easy for me to connect with different people from different backgrounds and different cultures. I think also maybe because I was an only child, I've had to early on, you know, be involved in conversations, just with so many different groups with maybe adults because my parents would take me along, and so that kind of informs the type of teacher and practitioner I am now. I love how you said something about being present and listening, and I that's something I try to practice more and more. Is a lot of time we when we're in a communication or a conversation, we're waiting for the other person to stop talking so we can say our piece, right? And I used to be like that, but now it's so much more interesting and fun to kind of sit back and listen actively and take it in, and I feel less need to necessarily talk, for no reason. I think it's also part of the aging process, Johnny, that happens. But when I was younger, I was very, I'm an English major, and I love talking and I love words. And I love debate. I used to love debating so much. I used to love being right. And so it's been a process of letting go of that, recognizing that words have limitations. And I used to be so entranced by them, and they are actually very powerful, but in a different way than I thought as an English major. So yeah, how did we get to that? I'm not sure.
No, that's fascinating and completely, as we mentioned before, who you are, who you've been. I often have that conversation as well, in the teaching world or in a conversation. Where did you grow up? For me, I also moved around quite a bit. Um, Around the United States, and then later I transferred to Southeast Asia, where I am, and always been more comfortable on the move than grounded and planted in one place. It just brings us a different perspective in who we are, and I guess it has that more fluidity in how we see the world, how we make friends, how we interact. Um, Both pros and cons. I mean, I definitely know people who have stayed in their own city and town for years in a lifetime and generations without moving out, and others who, like someone like my father, he every couple of years he moves to a different country.
Oh,
In that,
you
in
got
the
it
sense.
from him.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I'm also half an only child, so it affects. Um, Kind of going in your psychology and in the workplace of growing up in this way, how did that affect what you began to do with the work of being a practitioner, not only in the English side, but then afterwards, kind of going on the journey to finding Reiki, to finding these other
Mm.
alternative healing
First
modalities
of all, I've
that are
been
just
very blessed with two parents who are very open minded. My mom and my dad were 70s kind of hippies. So I could talk to them about my experimental phase when I was in college, and I was really, really exploring, the outer limits of the mind in different ways. And it was a blessing. I was able to share that with my parents. And then when I got married and I became a mom, at an early age, I got married at 24. I had my kid at 28. And then I kind of fell into what I thought a good mother would be like. And so I didn't realize that I could reinvent or I could define my own motherhood at the time. I didn't have that self knowledge, and so it was a beautiful but also very painful journey. And by 2015, of course, my daughter was older by that time, but I was very, very burnt out. I felt very depleted. And that's actually when I discovered Reiki. So, sometimes we have these crises in order to elevate, right? To level up. So ever since I started Reiki, at first it was kind of like some way to communicate with my mom, who was in the U.S. I was in the Philippines, and then I realized that okay, I was meant to be a teacher because people kept asking me to teach Reiki. And when I was younger, I thought I would be an English teacher actually, because I was, like I mentioned, I love the English language. I had a big crush on my high school English teacher, so he was inspirational. I thought that would be my route, and then I eventually, other things happened, and so it's funny because I ended up teaching not English, but teaching Reiki, teaching meditation, teaching yoga, teaching cacao facilitation, plant medicine, all this other stuff. So life is a journey with so many kind of like side bends and twists and turns, and then but everything seems to be falling into place really beautifully. The more I feel like the more we trust and the less we control, things can really start to unfold as they're meant to. And it takes a lot of just courage, and the more I'm able to let go of the things that I feel people expect of me, and even things that I expect of myself that are still buried deep in the unconscious, the lighter and the easier and the clearer the path ahead appears to be. I feel like I'm talking in very esoteric terms.
What was that opening, that more conscious character for you? Was there a greater sense of clarity that you could feel, or was it more of a naturalized journey and you thought this makes sense because people are inviting me? What was that outside thing that was happening?
So I started practicing meditation when I was 17. I was handed a book by Thich Nhat Hanh, and so those seeds were planted already, like breathing in peace, and all the very basic but fundamental stuff, right? And it wasn't until I did my first level of Reiki in 2015 in Thailand that it was almost like a door opened, and it was me looking or remembering stuff that I already knew. So it was kind of like it's like waking up from a dream, and I'm like, okay, yeah, like I know this stuff already. Why, like strangely sounded familiar. And so from there, things flowed very quickly, right? So that's sort of how it happened for me. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, of course it does. I guess furthering on then, it was kind of a clarity that it sensed to you that not only were you going on this because it may have made sense and you're naturally kind of a traveler and a journeyer anyway, but something just clicked for you. There was a sense of opening, and
yes,
you
that's
could
what happened
continue
with my
doing
first
this.
level of Reiki. Yeah.
In 2015.
Yeah,
Okay.
but then it's a succession of those, right? It's not like a
Right.
one thing. I felt the same when I had my first cacao ceremony. That was 3 years later, and I felt an energetic shift, and I was like, how can this be from this drink? Like, that doesn't make sense. I couldn't wrap my head around it. And then when I started studying and researching and working with that medicine more, I was like, yeah, of course plants are medicine. Of course they can shift our energy body. Like, like so there's little openings, little epiphanies. Actually, I feel like every day, if we can start the day with this kind of openness, like, what am I gonna find out today? What miraculous gift is gonna propel my growth and my healing today? And it can be something that looks small from the outside, but inside, the shift could be, yeah. So that's how I
It
look
can be
at it.
subtle. What I really admire about you, and for those that I admire that are spiritual practitioners and those that are far more conscious than I am, is that you're not trying so hard. You
Mm,
outside of this, like, you're more playful with it. You're more open and accepting and kind of just a partner and a best friend
mm,
with the universe. After that kind of shift of it could be a shift of, spiritual behavement that knocked you
mm,
back or knocked you down and kind of a
mm,
rebuilding back up, but a sense of vulnerability. And also with speaking about ceremonies and ceremonial practitioners, shamans, they also actively are in that
mm,
state of vulnerability, whether it is taking plant medicine or drumming, singing songs. Um,
mhm,
and that
mm,
is such a powerful technique because I've been struggling with this for months and maybe years of trying to force it, being a
mhm,
force of shift, trying to
mhm,
enact my own energy to feel it,
mhm, mhm,
forcefully feel it, and to forcefully make that universal change of
yeah.
mind or of emotions or of things that I want to have happen in life that may not be. I have kind of a different mind and different emotional state than maybe a lot of people that we talk to normally.
Mm, mhm,
But just that sense of rather than frustration, to drop it, to stay in the present moment, to ground ourselves often, and to be accepting almost as a friend. Is that what you get, or has it come in different ways?
mm. So there's a word that's coming up for you specifically that my mentors have shared with me, and I think it'll be key to your personal practice and to many, including myself. I practice. So I think you have an inkling that I am interested in a lot of different. I have a lot of hobbies.
Yeah.
Because I do like to keep things playful, and although I know we're here to, like, repay our karma and, like, all this stuff, we're also here to enjoy, right? That's also part of
Yes.
the package. We're not just here to pay the karmic debt and suffer and all that. So several so lately, over the past few years, I learned how to free dive, and then I learned also Latin dance, Afro Latin dancing, and also studying martial arts. So over the past 3 years, I was kind of those were like my main hobbies that I kind of rationalized, like, no, these are good for my practice. Also, they're just not for fun. So there's one thing in common that my teachers in those three different fields and skills repeated to me was that and can you guess what it is?
Work smarter, not harder. Be more playful with it.
Oh,
Don't
that's
try
actually
as
not bad.
hard.
That's not so bad. So they said the same word is relax.
Okay. Okay. Overthinking
Yeah.
it. Mm.
No, but you kind of were hinting at that, but all of them, it was when you're free diving, if you're not relaxed, there is no way you're going to last underwater. It's like a breath
Mm.
hold, right?
Mm.
So there's a whole process, there's a whole technique. They teach you how to relax. You'd think as a Reiki teacher and meditation and yoga instructor, I know how to relax. Not all the time, right? When
No.
it's something
Okay.
new and unfamiliar. So that's the first one. Next, in dancing, when I would start social dancing, I would felt so awkward. Your teacher's looking at you, you're in the dance floor, you're gonna make a mistake, you're overthinking the steps, and they're like, you just have to relax, let go. And the moment so it's easier said than done, right? And then of
Mm.
course in martial arts, it would be the same. So I'm studying Bushido, the way of the samurai, which aside from philosophy, of course, we wield the sword. So mine is a wooden sword, a bookend, and same. I so much want to do it correctly. I'm so focused on the technique, on being balanced, on cutting straight, on cutting intentionally, that I'm so tense, and and
Mm.
and that just doesn't look. It doesn't
What do
flow.
you think is that from a psychological standpoint when we come to a place of just needingness, of wantingness, of that frustration? I know energetically, um, there's two sides of the coin. There's love and then there's frustration or jealousy. There's happiness and joy and bliss and flow state, but then there's also anger, greed, lust, which
I
can
want to
cause
say it's
harm.
fear. It's love or fear. So when we're
Love or
tense,
fear.
we're afraid of making a mistake, because if we make a mistake, we're not going to be loved. We're going to be rejected. We're going to be judged. Like all of those things that way back, our ancestors, if they were rejected, they will die. Literally, they will die if they're rejected from the group. So we still have that in our nervous system. That's why putting ourselves in these new situations and mastering that, our nervous system, when we want to fight or flight or tense up, it's a great muscle to flex. Yeah. And so same with you in your spiritual practice, relaxing. Relax. And there's something else that's coming up for me is that I do like to work with polarity also, like masculine and feminine, which we all carry within us. And so what happens in our society, it's really based on a very kind of a hyper masculine template that's about achieving and pushing and reaching those goals and like crushing it. So I feel like that's the energy where you're coming from, that maybe you grew up in an environment where performance was, if you don't perform, you're not worthy, something
Not
like
at
that.
all. No, I'm pushing it for myself, and that's the
No,
thing.
but that's
The expectations of the United States, right, overall,
but
is
so I'm not
competition
saying
based.
necessarily your parents, but just society at large. Same with me. My parents were super chill with me. My mom, like, they're not asking me to do a PhD at age 49. I'm the one who's doing this to myself, right? So but that's because of the way that's why when I work with cacao, for example, and cacao has a divine feminine energy, and it's in attempt to restore that balance, right? So we're surrounded by this, like push and crush it. And so cacao is like, okay, wait a minute, let's just relax and enjoy and open like a rose, no matter what our gender is. Let's just relax into this moment and just open our heart chakra and trust that it's safe. It's safe for us to do that, and that we don't have to be crushing it every single moment.
Yeah, cacao ceremony is getting a lot of popularity. I only heard of it when I was in Copenhagen in Thailand. That was a very interesting experience for the full moon ceremony, which Copenhagen is famous for, also for meditation and yoga.
Yes.
And that and Tantra were two very feminine things that were completely missing within my life, and how to be authentically connected in a non-judgmental, non-neediness, even like without that mindset or that sense of sexuality, just a sense of being and a connection.
It's interesting that you said Tantra is a feminine art, because it's actually not. Tantra is precisely that harmonizing and that balancing of both. It's really the union. So I find it interesting that you would say that. And this aspect of neediness, because you've mentioned that word twice, it's actually it's a wounded feminine trait. And so what happens when we have aspects of the wounded feminine that emerge, we want to compensate it with hypermasculinity. Right. So those are all, that's why that self-inquiry is so interesting. And all of my hobbies contribute to my self-knowing, especially the Latin dancing, because it's a polarity based exchange. So like I said, they're not just hobbies.
You also kind of mentioned a couple times, and quite a few podcasts, both this one and a previous one, almost every conversation in some way, we come back to the idea and the theme of masculine and feminine, whether intentionally or not, which is probably a universal sign for me to be more in that
awareness,
more in that flow, more in that awareness, but not only awareness, but into the action and behavior about the dynamics of masculine and feminine and how to be within. I'm
Mm.
wondering, with these hobbies, is that something that clients come to you with when they come to a Reiki? When they're speaking in a consultation type setting or in a cacao type ceremony, or in a retreat that you lead, is that a theme that comes up? Is wanting to
Mm.
balance those dynamics, or do they want to tap into one more than the other? Or is it
Mm.
just maybe not in those words, or is it grounding?
Mm.
Because for me, I always gave the excuse, I need to be grounded, I need to be present, but maybe there's something else at work.
Mm. Mm. So I work with a very, very wide range of clients, and a lot of them are beginners. And so for beginners, they're not aware of even this language of
Mm,
grounding, of divine
sure.
masculine, like all of that. So we don't even, we barely even touch that. Maybe I'll talk about it if we're drinking cacao, right?
Mhm.
So it's when they come, it's more because they're stressed, they're
Yep.
anxious, they have depression, they have insomnia. Like these are the common things. And then little by little, as we start working together, then they realize, like they do like a Reiki session, and they're feeling opening up in the upper chakra. So then yes, we're gonna ground. Okay.
Mm.
Or then or maybe we start having conversations about burnout and stress from work. Then yeah, we're going to start talking about hyper masculinity, and like I mentioned with you, using cacao as a feminine counterbalancing tool. So that's how it would work. But I try, well, I it people don't really understand, like if I'm going to say, hey, we're going to work on this and that, they'll be like, well, what is that? So I try to be actually more accessible with my language at the moment, and it seems yeah,
What does that look like?
like for
Yeah, so
now.
if someone is listening right now and they're like, I completely don't understand where this conversation is going. These two crazy characters, one from Vietnam and one that's in Philippines.
Yeah,
I just stumbled on this. How can we break it down to be more
sure.
practical, essentially?
Yeah, so basically the idea is that we're all here, we all want to be happy, right? And then we're all faced with challenges, difficulties, stresses. So basically what I'm here to offer are natural tools that are accessible to everybody, that will help us in navigating those challenges and making them in making us feel more confident in dealing with them, and finding more inner space, inner peace, so that the challenges won't go away, but we'll just be better equipped, right? And so if something that would have been deemed catastrophic 5 years ago occurs today, you can be more mindful thanks to your meditation practice, thanks to your grounding practice or whatever, and be like, okay, so this is like a big challenge, and let's see how I feel about it, and let's see like what what would be the highest course of action, that I like having those tools to help us navigate and reach our highest potential, if that's our choice, right?
Mm, mm. Yeah, you mentioned tools. Let's go ahead and dive into a couple of those tools, really practical, that we can use right now. Just something that allows us to become more ourselves, maybe to have gratitude. Are you thinking of some tools that are practical for this conversation?
Sure.
Of maybe the person that's listening right now, they're like,
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
struggling. I don't feel like I'm everything that I could be. This week is going all right, but it's not exceptional. It doesn't
Mhm.
bring me joy.
Well, first of all, I want to say exceptional is a matter of perception.
Mhm, yeah.
And I've had days where literally nothing happens. And maybe I'm fasting and I'm home all day and doing my homework. And for me, that's exceptional. So
Mm,
number one. Number two, I was thinking I could share the 5 precepts of Reiki with our viewers. Maybe some of them are not familiar. So as I mentioned earlier, Reiki is really what propelled my spiritual practice and put me in this path of teaching, and helping the community achieve their highest goals in terms of spirituality and healing. Would that be okay?
That would be perfect. I would love
Okay.
to.
Right. So first of all, for those who aren't familiar, Reiki is a Japanese energy healing technique that celebrated centennial last year. So Mikao Usui Sensei came from a samurai lineage, which explains why I'm interested in samurai culture. I'm trying to kind of go to the essence of Reiki before it was kind of diluted as it traveled through the West, which is a normal occurrence. There's no judgment, nothing wrong with that. But I, as part of a Reiki practice, Reiki practitioners recite and try to live by the 5 precepts of Reiki. So go meaning 5, right, in Japanese. So I'll share them with you in English, and I'd also like to share them with you in Japanese. And so simply because, like I mentioned earlier, language is power, and it also has a, what do you call it, like a sound resonance to it, right? So it'll be different in your own language, it'll be different in English, it'll be different in Japanese. And so sound healing is another technique, right? We've had some beautiful sound healers over in the ashram, and it's always so powerful. So words also have that. Our bodies are instruments also, made for divine healing and transmission. So why don't we find a comfortable seat? We can recite the Gokai together. So we can bring our hands in Gassho position. So Gassho, which is the name of my center, is Namaste in Japanese. It's this mudra. So it's an energetic lock. It's not just a greeting symbol. It's really connecting both parts of the body, both hemispheres of the brain, and again, masculine and feminine, yin and yang. Here we go again. So bringing our hands in Gassho with our thumbs at our sternum, the middle of our chest. Breathing, taking a few breaths. Breathe through your nose and bring the breath all the way down into your belly, into your hara, located right below your navel, 3 fingers actually below your navel. Allowing ourselves to center and ground, using the breath, using the hara, activating this point of power. And as we inhale into our hara, we can start exhaling into our hands. Maybe even imagining the top of our crown gently unfolding, receiving universal life force energy. So breathing in through the crown into the hara, exhaling through the hands, just for a couple rounds. And as I say the Gokai, you can mentally repeat it in your mind, or you can even say it out loud at home. Just for today, I let go of anger.
Just for today, I let go of anger.
Just for today, I let go of worry.
Just for today, I let go of worry.
Just for today, I receive gratefulness.
Just for today, I receive gratefulness.
Just for today, I work honestly.
Just for today, I work honestly.
Just for today, I'm kind to all.
Just for today, I'm kind to all.
今日だけは怒るな、心配すな、感謝して、行を励め、人に親切に。I'm just feeling into those words, allowing the resonance to penetrate. So anchoring into your breath. When you're ready, you can slowly release your hands and gently open your eyes. Thank you, Johnny.
That was really nice, really grounding.
Wonderful.
This is a daily practice we can use every day to start off with.
Multiple times if you need a little pick-me-up.
Yeah, it's certainly, especially during a tough, stressful week. Having it just as often as we have our meals is always nice. You mentioned the power of words before. I'm wondering, during the practice, you said that our people can say it in their heads. Does it act as the same in frequency or in like staying positive, or is it something that begs to be said as a resonance?
I feel like there's added power when we use the sound. Absolutely. But if you're in your office or on a plane, I don't look too weird. If
Say
I
it
do
even
that from the
louder. Get a
airport with my
karaoke
kids,
machine.
she's gonna get up. So practice your own discernment. Yeah, definitely. If you're
Staying
home alone,
woke.
I would say it out loud. Actually, you can chant it. You can chant kyo dake wa ikaru, like you can chant it for an hour. That's a beautiful practice.
Is that the
Yeah,
traditional ways to chant
yeah.
it?
They do it. They do it in Japan. It's like a
Oh,
Shinto
really?
practice is chanting. Kotodama.
Okay. I would love to
Yeah.
do that. If there's
Right?
an English version, then that would be exceptional. I'll look at that. Um,
I can
yeah,
probably send you, a link. Yeah.
I would love to attach that in. Um, but there always comes to say in mantras or in a way of ceremony, in a way
Mm,
of practice, a daily practice, something that is constant, that brings us back to ourselves throughout all the hectic activities of the day. Coming then, would you consider this like a mini ceremony? Would it be something of an activity
mm,
that people can
okay.
do? Maybe if
Yeah.
we could give a comparison, something like doing devotions for a
Yeah.
Christian,
Yeah.
doing morning and evening devotions, or for a Muslim doing
Mm,
prayers 5 times a day to give their will and their love all to Allah, or if it's for Buddhism, um, there's mantras that we can say throughout the day.
meditation, chanting.
Yeah, exactly. Or doing beads in Catholic, doing a
Yeah.
line of beads.
Now it's a
Would this be
beautiful
the
question.
equivalent?
So
Mm,
it's funny that I love that. I actually like the word devotion because
mm,
I don't know, and it feels delicious to my nervous system because devotion, like ceremony, are lost arts or forgotten arts. That's why we try to revive it. And so when I share cacao ceremony, I often, if I don't forget, I try to say, you can do this every day for, like 3 minutes just to be intentional when you drink your cup. Do it with coffee if you don't have cacao there. So anything, in other words, to answer your question, anything can become ceremony with our intention. So we don't
mm.
need a big flamboyant temple and all the incense and the gongs and all that. I mean, it's fun to have that once in a while, right? When we go on a pilgrimage, like I'm having a retreat in Kyoto very soon, so that's like a big a Reiki retreat. We're going to the birthplace of Reiki, so that's something very special. For some people, it's once in a lifetime, but ceremony can be every day when we have that. I want to say devotion is the same. It's like devotion to our higher self. Like, thank you for still being here and for going on, in spite of the difficulties sometimes, and um, drinking your tea or your cacao and making that ceremony and saying the gokai. That could be your
Mm.
simple ceremony every morning. And I want to say, I also you mentioned consistency, and yes, it's so important to have a daily practice, but I I tend to switch mine around. So maybe it'll look different another day, and sometimes I blame myself, like I need to be more disciplined and more consistent. But whatever works, I want to say whatever works, do that. Yeah.
Of course. I think now that you said devotion, I think I would rather use that as well.
Mm,
Rather than saying words that are empty, that are maybe overused, and there is
mm,
an intention to it, certainly. But if a word or a phrase resonates more strongly to you,
mm,
for one
mm, mm,
reason or another, I strongly would suggest that you would rather use that because it only increases your joy and your happiness. Same thing if you start noticing words that affect you negatively.
mm,
I did a workshop earlier, and one thing that we did with the master coach, she's also well experienced, much like you, in that we read a list of words, both from the positive side, and then we read through each word that brought a high vibration to us, and just to check in how that feels, how
mm,
our
mm,
energy. And similarly, we did that on those words or beliefs that negatively affect us. And after about 50 words of going through each of those columns, we could really see that within ourselves, how it's affecting,
mm,
um, and how we can shake it off, which she did after every column, especially for the negative ones, so that it doesn't stay attached to us. So it doesn't,
mhm,
whether we give ownership to it or not, just to not be that effect, to not be, and I want to use the word impersonation, but I think that's maybe not the right word, but maybe it
mhm,
is since it's coming up in one category. I did want to come back to ceremony, and I guess there's a rekindling of the power of ceremony in a mass culture. Would you say that? Would you see that? Or is it still kind of hidden or buried?
mm,
There's a
mm.
lot of ceremony with psychedelics
Yeah.
nowadays, with cacao ceremony, with a dance like kirtan.
Mm. There's definitely a huge, huge revival. Personally, I think it's because we're in the Aquarian age now, so we're gonna see
Mm,
much more ceremony going forward. And
okay.
like you mentioned, psychedelics, ayahuasca or cacao or psilocybin, they're becoming mainstream. Like
Mhm,
my prediction is in within 10 years, they're gonna be even more mainstream. A lot of people are states are starting to legalize them. So that's why the word ceremony is getting more accepted. Of course, it depends on where you're located. For me in the Philippines, it's still quite conservative, and these plant medicines aren't so much accepted, which is why, for example, last my last event, I called it cacao and meditation.
mhm.
Yeah, which is much more palatable, because people can get suspicious of the word ceremony. Maybe they think we're going to sacrifice someone, or I
I hope
don't know.
not. That's not the intention.
Yeah, so, I mean, back in the day they did, right? Like the same people
Mhm.
who did cacao ceremonies, they sacrificed humans. As a matter of fact, they mixed blood with cacao in some instances.
That's
So
right.
so for some, it's still in the collective uh, consciousness. It's still in their DNA. So there's no judgment there. It's just like I said, we try to, and something that Ojas actually mentioned. So I think everyone who's listening should be familiar. Hopefully, is familiar with
Yes,
Ojas. But
I believe so. If they
yeah,
follow
yeah,
Master
if
the
they
Flow,
follow the
they
flow.
they follow
But
Master
but
Ojas and diviners. Yeah.
Ojas mentioned that we're, I can't remember exactly, but something about there's a message or there's a medicine. He didn't use that word, but that they have, and then there's an audience, and we need to help in bridging that, right? And
Mhm.
so being conscious of the words we choose, that's part of of having that bridge, where and for whom gets to cross that bridge, is our language is also part of that. So yeah, but I
Yeah.
do like the word ceremony. I do like the word devotion. Yeah, it depends. I always check in for. I don't have a rule book. I check in for spirit. what should I do in my copy? That's like
Right.
conscious marketing. We talked about this too a little bit.
That's right, we did.
Yeah.
Yeah, turning it on and off. I think of it as a faucet, and I'm playing with that visual right now of asking the spirit to turn on my creative faucet
Mm.
and imagining that that's coming, that the water
Mm.
or that creative is coming down.
Mm.
Um, and with enough practice, I'm actually seeing a physical difference of new thoughts coming to
Mm. Mm.
mind. As we continue to talk about words and sound, it begs mentioning that Master Oneness is on silence for a year.
Yes.
And so there's no sound coming out. There's a complete fasting of that,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
complete clearing. And I guess that in itself is kind of a ceremony
Yes.
of a very
Very.
long one,
Yeah.
because it has to take consistent mental and heartfelt practice of not being able to, or not choosing not to speak, even if there's um, volunteer relationships that are going on, of doing the work for diviners, or if there are events and retreats going on. And for someone that's undisciplined and a little more unconscious, they would more easily fall into the trap of getting out of their ceremony or out of their practice and to be responding to that. But if it's something that you kind of commit to, then there's a continuous resetting of the self. Can you kind of speak on that, the power of maybe not having the words and choosing not to do something as also a part of ceremony?
Interesting. Well, I can't
Yeah.
speak to being in silence for 1 year. That's absolutely
I
for
can't
sure.
either.
I really cannot. What I can speak of is
Yeah.
not eating, right? So the practice of
Yes.
fasting,
Mhm.
and that I know is something that's widely practiced in the ashram, and it's very new to me. So this week I did my first 45 hour fast, and I'm hoping to keep on building. Building with that. In one of my plant ceremonies recently, um, I was given the instruction to master fasting,
Hmm.
like a very clear instruction. And that was going to be part of my spiritual growth and my path. So for me, it's challenging because I have attachment to food, like many of us. I
Mhm.
enjoy it very much. I take so much pleasure from it and joy. So, but it's really like, Ojas is such an inspiration, and he, his voice is there telling me it's just the mind, it's just mastering the mind, and the food will be there, whether it's after 3 days or a week or 40 days, food will still
Yeah.
be there. So, same with the speech and the sound, and life will continue, if he's in silence. And, um, so that's all I can speak about withholding. So in this case, withholding food, but yeah, I can't really speak on the silence bit.
Just that sense, the act of doing and non-doing.
Mm,
Again, we come back to that duality
mm, mm,
and
mm,
being in that center of
mm,
of that presence, and recognizing that we may not need right now, even
mm,
though we might be so conditioned to wanting and having it and
mm,
the
mm, mm,
convenience of it. When I also started to do fasting as a way, there was a lot of pushback against my family here. My wife, she kept buying me food every single day. Eat, eat. And the first time that I did it, it was for 3 or 4 days here, um, around the family. And because they grew up without having much, without having food a lot in abundance, without having a lot of possessions, for me, choosing not to have that something, having that possession, is kind of a turnaround. It's 180. It's seen as odd, as different, as other, as being sick. If I were to practice fasting or some other, or silence or something other, it might be to the same. But again, that's why I mentioned having consistency and also being clear, not only to yourself. Master Oneness also taught me to make that commitment with others, and prepare others and also yourself, but prepare others in what you're about to do and what you're
Yeah.
about to take on. And that's what he did for the well, he did it actually 2 days after Diviners Fest. That was kind of his showcase, was Diviners Fest, and after he did the ceremony of closing off. And to make that commitment for everyone and the agreement. I think there's also an agreement that needs to be placed as well. So as we come to the end of this, again, please remind everyone what's going on. You mentioned that you have a couple of retreats and events coming up, including one in Japan. And if anyone is interested in coming to your not your ashram, but your meditation center, where you do a lot of very interesting group and I think one-on-one things as well, please tell everyone where they can find you and how they can connect with you.
Thank you, Johnny. So I no longer have I used to have a Reiki studio, which was the Gassho Center for Healing Arts, but I closed that in 2019. So now I'm kind of like working with different studios and wellness retreat centers and so on here in Cebu, Philippines. So people can go to the GasshoCenter.com website, where usually the events are updated. And like you mentioned, I do teach Reiki level 1 and 2 and 3 as well, in group and private, online as well as in person. So if you're not in the Philippines, you can still have a Zoom call and a Zoom class. But yeah, definitely the Kyoto Reiki retreat is in May, on May 17th. That's 2 months from now. So just message me on Facebook or Instagram. It's Kazane, which is my Japanese name, and Wendy is my birth name, so Kazane Wendy. And on Insta, it's Kazane_Wendy.
Perfect. Well, as we come to the end with Master the Flow, thank you so much, Wendy, for coming on, for joining me for an in-depth conversation. I hope we can have this again. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Johnny. Pleasure's mine.
Namaste.